Hello, hello. I was asked to review the book Unforeseeable by Jeff Jones. I rarely read Catholic fiction, and the last book I read was The Conclave, which was a disappointment and totally waste of time because it was presenting a scenario that was contrary to the teaching of the gospel. So I started to read this book hoping that it is better than The Conclave, and I was not disappointed. It's way, way better than the conclave. First of all, because it's faithful to the teaching of the Catholic Church, and also like the way the book is written is thought-provoking, and also it has a lot of things that I am going to talk about as we go along. I got an ebook version instead of a hard copy because I feel more comfortable reading books electronically. The cover seems intriguing, and it has this man standing in front of a car. The background has a reddish shade. So what is this man doing in front of the expensive-looking car? Is he confronting the person inside? Is he about to be hit by the car? The title, Unforeseeable, seems to mean that what I am going to read is something that I will not expect. The subtitle, A Bargain with Time, The Cost of a Better Tomorrow, seems to indicate some negotiation and purchase or trade for something better in the future. I thought this book is about this man in front of the car who will make a deal with the one in the car. So as we go through this book, we see that the dedication shows that the writer values his family a lot, and the table of contents shows it has 9 chapters. So it is not a long book. However, this is quite deceiving because the contents of this book has a lot to say and it is well thought of. Now we go to the book itself. It has no introductions. It just goes straight to chapter 1. It begins with Stephen, the main character, in a drinking place. I assume that this is the man at the front cover. And he made a political comment which got me to think this might be another propaganda book. And so I thought, can politics mix with Catholicism? We have this mistaken concept of separation of church and state, where the church cannot comment on laws. But the concept of separation of church and state is that the state cannot define one state religion. It does not mean that the church cannot speak out against unjust laws. The church must not only speak out against unjust laws, but she must also give the reasons why the laws are unjust. And we see this in our society. The church has been silent or has been silenced from speaking out on critical issues. And what we have is a culture of death, where the solution to every decision is death. Going back to this book, Stephen met another man, Dolan, inside the drinking place, whom I suspected was vital in the story. The men got into a conversation. Stephen said how things could be better if there's a shift in perspective. And he was then offered an opportunity to go back in time and change things to make things better. One thing I wish Jeff, the author, had done is to explain the term butterfly effect. I had to stop and think what it is. In any case, it did not hinder my understanding of the story. I will stop narrating what happens next so as not to spoil the story. However, I would like to comment on how the book is written. The pace is good. The dialogue is also very realistic, intellectual, and it keeps you fixed on the dialogue. Dolan was very manipulative and yet subtle. This is how temptations come. They are subtle with a little encouragement of what we are thinking, letting us think that we are right. Then a few more nudges, and then we take action, thinking that we have done something good. And as the story goes, Stephen fell into Doran's encouragement and regrets his actions. And here's the best part of the story. Jeff presents Dolan as he is, an arrogant person who has little respect for those he deals with. He goes on into a sermon on why Stephen fell into his trap. Jeff had Dolan reveal how the devil sees us, far inferior to them, not worthy of dignity that God has given us. In one of his dialogues, as Stephen accused Dolan of misleading him, Dolan pushed back and put the blame back on Stephen. This shows how temptations work. We see something good and are encouraged to do it, and then once we have done it and see the consequence of our actions, we are riddled with guilt and shame. And the devil accuses us and tells us it is our fault, and he would not take responsibility for this temptation, which is true because in the end, we make our decisions. There's no one to blame except us. And this leads to regret and guilt, which sometimes, when the person gets desperate, even to taking one's own life. Stephen descends into a dark place before it shines a light of hope for him. While we will have to live with the consequences of our actions, it presents an opportunity for hope and restoration, not in the sense of bringing back things as they were, but for healing, where all things work together for the good of those who love God. Our bad decisions, our bad actions, the things that we have done before, the things that we have thought or encouraged others, these things God can use for our good. It doesn't mean that God is the source of all these things, but it means that God has that power to use them and to change us and transform us. So I hope that Jeff writes a sequel for this book, to this book. And like I said, it's not a waste of your time. I read it in 1.5 hours and I could not stop. It's not a light book to read because it has a lot in it. The dialogues, especially of Dolon, needs to be looked at carefully because this is how we are tempted and how we give into sin. And knowing how our enemy works will help us become stronger and be conscious of how he works. Of course, the end also needs careful thought and careful read. We have to read it carefully because it contains a lot of things. This is my review and I hope you read the book. God bless you.